Hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. For those of you new to my channel, I review all things movie and TV. So if you like what you hear, subscribe, share, and comment down below. So today we're talking about Succession Season 4, Episode 4. And Kendall, Logan, Roy, Killer Roy, however you want to take that, he is just like a cat out of a hat, right? So this episode was fantastic. Again, the morning after. And the biggest revelation, besides, well, I wouldn't call Ken's decision at the end a revelation, just a confirmation of the type of person he already is the fact that Shiv is pregnant. She's been pregnant for 20 weeks, and this could not have come at a worse time. And it explains why she was so angry with Logan. It wasn't just about the divorce. So she's kind of mourning two things. First, the loss of her father, and then second, the fact that her child will not have a grandfather. So I think she was sad about both. And also it explains why she doesn't want to go anywhere near Tom, right? She's like disgusted by his presence, and that's because she's carrying baby Tom with her. You know, and this baby is the only thing standing between Tom and the door, it seems. At the start of the episode, Siobhan gets a phone call from her doctor, and apparently during her pregnancy there have been some issues or complications, but whatever the case, it seems like everything is fine. She's healthy. Nothing, you know, nothing to worry about. And it was such an awkward conversation with the doctor. Like, she looked like she felt sad, you know, like she almost wanted bad news so she could, you know, maybe terminate the pregnancy. Like, she didn't seem too excited about the news, right? Especially when she hung up the phone, like she looked really sad and upset. And I think for Shiv, this is a turning point, right? She just felt comfortable with the siblings. She finally feels like she found her place. And I think she maybe is worried that having a baby will derail all that. And it's really sad to say, because I was thinking about Kendall. Like, we never see his kids. You know, I don't know how he parents them, but like, it doesn't really stop him from doing anything. But with Siobhan, like, this is already a boys' club. Unfortunately, in the eyes of these men, it just kind of makes her a liability, you know, or she feels like, you know, she just had all this momentum and now it's going to crush it, even though it shouldn't. Right, if anybody could do both, it's probably Siobhan, but I think that's what she's worried about. Like, in part, she wants to be the best mother that she can because she doesn't really like her mother, but at the same time, she doesn't really want the burden of this at this moment. And Logan's death should have been the start of a new era, but instead, it's like we're right back to where we started. Right, especially for Shiv, right? She's like bottom of the barrel by the end of this episode. I couldn't believe what Ken said. It's like all this bonding and all this time they had spent together, it was almost for nothing. You know, what did Ken say? Daddy make work? You have no experience? Like, I have a feeling that Kendall will be eating those words. And I feel like Siobhan, you know, her better judgment, she kind of went along with it, hoping for a change. You know, she was kind of enjoying the vibe, the transparency, but the way she walked out of that room at the end, you could tell like they were all dead to her. Like, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice. So I have a feeling, you know, she will forgive, but she will never forget what Kendall said and what these guys just pulled on her. The episode begins and they're all mourning Logan in his own home. And we see Marcia for the first time, right? Like, she comes out of left field. Ken's reaction was the same as everybody on, you know, watching. Like, where have you been? Who, like, huh? And according to Marcia, they have been speaking intimately every night. Apparently, they have remained in contact. I couldn't tell if she was lying or not. Like, it was very difficult to suss Marcia out. And, you know, she took control right away. Like, it's almost like she never left. And you saw that with the way she treated Carrie, right? And she kind of banished her back to her small apartment. Like, the shade that Marcia threw was just like, my God. And the thing with Marcia is that none of these people are mourning, right? She kind of sells the house quite quickly. Like, shout out to Connor for making his first deal. Like, Marcia's presence in the house, like, she had some power, right? Like, they were taking her orders. You know, Colin was there. Like, she had a gang. So I suspect that they were in contact. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to kind of make the impression that she did. I thought it was so funny when Willa came with Connor and she's like, look how far we've come. Like, because, you know, Willa was an escort and Marcia isn't much better, you know what I mean? So Marcia she's also not of this world, but she has adapted and she knows this family well, right? Like, you need to get what you can and get out with these people. And for better or worse, I actually felt really bad for Carrie. You know, Carrie was his right-hand man, and I wonder if Carrie has insurance, especially after that whole debacle, you know, with trying to be a news anchor. But when she came back to the house and Marcia cruelly threw her out, like, that was cruel. Even by Roman standards, they were like, this is really mean. She said something about marriage arrangements and a contract and something to do with lawyers. And I don't know if y'all peeped that, but she basically was desperate to find a document. But unfortunately, Marcia blocked her. So I was just wondering, like, did Marcia maybe find something and flush it down the toilet? I don't know what. But the idea that Logan would marry Carrie didn't really make any sense to me. Like, Logan is the type of guy that, I don't know, he's very, I'm not going to say wishy-washy, but he can change his mind a lot. And so the idea that he would marry her maybe seemed real to her at that time, but I seriously doubt it. And one of the reasons I think this is because of this bombshell document, right? With Ken's name underlined / crossed out. So that was the big thing this episode, right? Did Logan want, well, first, did Logan want to marry Carrie? I seriously doubt it. Second question, did Logan want Ken as successor? Logically speaking, I don't see how that makes any sense. Like, this issue of, was it underlined or crossed out? 99.9% he meant to cross it out. Also, it's suggested that this document is very old. It's not dated, it's not stamped. So maybe at one point he did consider him a successor, but with everything that's gone down, I just don't see how Logan would ever give Kendall like the reins of anything. So prior to this letter, everybody is just calm. Like, that was the weird thing. Like, this letter got everything in motion. Right, this little letter, this little underline or crossed out, you know, got everybody triggered, because the whole time they're in Logan's house, like, you see, you know, Jerry and Frank and Carl and everybody's just kind of sitting at his dinner room table, like, everyone's lounging, and it just felt like everybody was waiting for someone to tell them what to do, right? Like, none of these people are leaders, right? Like, they're so used to being led, and so everyone's paralyzed until this bombshell-like document. And so the next 48 hours is quite crucial, because everyone is trying to regroup, everyone is trying to cling or sell or, you know, get back in with the power. But the problem is, who has the power? And the biggest person who's, you know, in danger is Tom. And I felt like Tom was very smart this episode, right? Like, when he first comes into Logan's apartment, he does a double take. First he looks at the kids, and then he looks at the old guard, and then he goes towards, you know, Frank, Jerry, and Carl. And once he kind of gets roasted, like, Frank summarized his position quite perfectly, right? He kind of just ripped him apart, basically saying that, you know, you have no shot at the ring. The only shot you had was with your wife, who hates you. So you're basically lucky to be in the room, right? Like, that's what Tom was told. And Tom is very smart this episode, because he basically plants a bunch of seeds everywhere, and he kind of has to hope that one of them grows, right? Like, his only hope is with Shiv or with Roman. Like, he does a good job of getting into their heads, right? Like, consoling his wife, you know, trying to let her know that he's still here for her, playing on Roman's ego. The only person that, unfortunately for him, I think if he had any hope, it would be anyone but Kendall. Because Kendall says it, like, point blank, right? I like you, good luck, right? So that area for Tom is shut out, but Tom is trying his best. And luckily for him, there might be an in with Marcia, right? Maybe that's her function. And the person who sees that first is Greg, right? Like, Greg, at the start of this episode, he was just shut out, find a new mommy. Like, they just cut his ass out directly, and he kind of deserved it. The audacity, like, the fact that he actually thought Logan could leave him, you know, second in command, is just delusion. But he was very smart, right? He sided with Marcia right away. He was gaslighting Carrie, being like, this is the way he was in Marcia's ear, you know, acting like he was there for her. Shout out to Greg. And you know what, weirdly enough, I think it might have worked, you know, and this might be their only hope, right? So if Kendall, or if Tom and Roman want... So if Tom and Greg have any hope, it's honestly through Marcia and Roman. Like, that is the only way they're gonna get back in. I will say this about Tom, you know, throughout the episode, he keeps saying things like, I'm ready to serve, I'm ready to serve. And in his defense, he was loyal to Logan. He did back the right horse at the end of the day. Like, you know, he said it best in a previous season. Like, I've never seen him get screwed over, right? He picked the right choice. The problem is, without him, everything's up in the air, right? And he needs to figure out what he's gonna do. Turning point comes when Frank reveals this document to everyone. And Frank was in that room for so long that I thought maybe he underlined it and crossed it out until they mentioned the fact that Greg's name was on the document and all these things. And so I think this document is very old, but nonetheless, he had to kind of tell everybody about it. And I love this scene when they're all in a circle being like, haha, yeah, hopefully it doesn't get flushed down the drain. Like, they're all trying to distance themselves. Like, none of them want to be the one to get rid of this piece of paper. And then none of them really want to know about it. Like, it was such lawyer talk. Like, they're also slimy, right? Like, you know, like, haha, who's going to do it? Like, it was like hot potato. You know, they were passing this document around, hoping somebody would get rid of it, until it was too late and they had to kind of reveal its contents to everyone. This document is basically the end of this sibling alliance. Like, they've done such a good job, Ken, Shiv, and Roman, of staying together, of sticking together. But, you know, as soon as Ken hears that he could be a successor, or that his dad considered him a successor, he doesn't even think logically about it, right? He doesn't care about the timeline of the document. He doesn't care about anything. Right? He just automatically assumes, yep, I'm the successor. And what was interesting, he got angry with his siblings for questioning him, right? Like, there's no logic to this document, right? He was angry. And when he said, it's sure as F doesn't say Shiv, like, that's when evil Ken came out. But it's almost like all the work they had done, he just threw it out the window. He didn't care. And as soon as he found out his name was on that document, his whole vibe changed, right? It became very manipulative. Right, like he tried to do this thing of us versus them. Like, he tried to create that dynamic, being like, listen, it's either me or the old guard. But, you know, as the episode goes on, what Ken is really saying is either you're with me or you're against me. You know, that's the tone he started to take towards the end of the episode. And he keeps saying it's temporary, right? Like, this document is just temporary. We just need someone to take over. We want this deal. You know, it's a feather in our cap. You know, then I'm going to go off with the siblings and, like, we're going to do our own thing, right? So Ken, you know, he tries to pitch himself. But again, I could see the power shift in his mind. Like, his thoughts were just running as soon as he saw his name on that document. The problem with Ken, and you see this towards the end of the episode, is that he doesn't wear power well. He's very much like his father in that way. Like, as soon as he gets any power, he loses his damn mind. I think Frank said it best when he's like, you're doing so well. Like, are you sure you want back in? Basically, he's like, you seem healthy and happy. Why on earth would you want this? And Ken, I think, you know, he has a complicated relationship with his father, but he always resented the fact that he never got his blessing to become the successor. And this letter is all he has to hold on to. And it's not much. And I think he knows it's not much. And I thought it was super sweet what Frank tried to do, right? He kind of tries to meet him halfway, right? Like, sometimes he didn't, sometimes, but, you know, he was an old bastard, but he loved you. You know, he kind of gives him this really nice father-son moment. And Frank is an interesting character because he's known Logan for a long time. And he's kind of seen these kids grow up. So I think some part of him, you know, was trying to be nice to Ken. But I think he also understands that, you know, the odds of Logan leaving this to Kendall is slim to none, right? Like, he had to reveal the letter, but, you know, there was some BS there. As soon as Ken finds out about the letter, he goes into overdrive, right? He starts making plans, he starts making moves. And Kendall's interesting. I feel like he took the document as a sign to just go off, because there have been some indications where he's been uncomfortable with this alliance, right? And case in point, when they tried to talk to Lucas over the phone, like, that whole phone conversation was super awkward. So they get a phone call and then they call him back, but Lucas is sort of, you know, someone who works for him answers the phone. And the whole time the three of them are on the phone with Lucas's sort of man or assistant, you know, like, they're all talking. And at one point Shiv says, you know, it's fluid. no one is in charge here. And I could have sworn Kendall's face was like fluid. Like, what do you mean by fluid? You know, like, he didn't seem comfortable with the idea of like not being the one to take charge. You know, I think he has that impulse, but he's kept it kind of hidden. And now that he got this, you know, fake green light, he's kind of going off. And the thing is, no one really believes that these children are competent, right? One of the reasons that they back Kendall and Roman is because they're easier to control, right? And I think the difference, like, this deal is really interesting to see how it plays out, because they're in such a vulnerable position, right? Like, they can either sell and just, you know, move forward, have a nice life, or they could end up destroying this whole thing. And I think the problem with Kendall, and why in a lot of ways he's the worst pick, is because, like his father, he doesn't know when to quit, right? He doesn't know when to call it a day. So if anyone was going to close this deal, honestly, the idea that it's Kendall, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, his ego's too big. You know, Stewie, this guy was kind of gassing him up, being like, are you sure you want this deal? Are you sure you want this deal? Like, that guy is like a devil, you know, like puppeteering some things. So one of the biggest moments in this episode is when Kendall finally gets the conversation he wants, because he's frustrated, right? He wants to lead, but Shiv is pissed off, Roman is pissed off, and he finally forces them into this conversation with him. And Shiv says it best, right? She's like, you've had this hard-on since you found out your name was on this piece of paper. And the things that come out of Kendall's mouth, right? Like a vibey new banner. Like, I'm the old but the new. Like, he doesn't really deny any of Shiv's like accusations. And Shiv kind of says it best. You know, in a lot of ways, he's kind of the worst pick, because they're kind of in the situation where it's like either one of them takes the charge or somebody else takes the charge. And watching the way power kind of changes these three is really interesting, because initially Roman and Shiv were together, right? Like, Roman is very uncomfortable with the idea, but as soon as he found out that he could be second, he got super comfortable just in that room directly, right? And that's the thing about these kids, they're so easily swayed. And Shiv, you know, this was a turning point for Siobhan, because she had nothing to bargain with, right? Like, all she could do was make them swear on the day of their father's death, but she didn't have anything on them. She had no way of making sure that they do what she, you know, what they tell her to do, that they do what she wants, right? She's kind of at their mercy. And, you know, watching Ken and Roman be like, yeah, like, we got you, was super awkward. And the thing about Shiv is, like, you know, this is not her world, actually. Like, she used to thrive in politics. Like, that was her gift. But her dad pulled her out because a lot of the people that she was supporting kind of went against, you know, his agenda. And I think initially Shiv kind of saw power. Like, she kind of saw how media and kind of being in charge in this way, you know, like how this could benefit her. However, this is a boys' club, right? She'll never be able to get in. She doesn't like the presidential candidate. She doesn't really like Ken being in charge. She has no power here. And the only arena where she did have power, or she did feel, you know, like she could do something, she was kind of taken away from. So Shiv is literally standing there. She doesn't know what to do, right? She can't negotiate. That's the thing. And Shiv is very good at talking and negotiating, but with her brothers, she was at a loss for words, right? Like, she literally couldn't negotiate or say anything. And the way she stormed out of that room, I could tell, like, she's coming for their heads, right? Now that she knows what it is, that's it. So ultimately, the board agrees to put Roman and Kendall in charge. And Roman and Kendall, like, putting these two in charge is gonna be very explosive, right? Because I think Kendall thinks he has more control over the situation than he does. And again, everybody kind of promotes them for their own reason, right? On one hand, they're hoping they can bring this deal home. On the other hand, you know, you got a whole team with Stewie and these guys hoping for, I don't know what they're hoping for, but I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. And so we get to this last scene where they're trying to figure out how to orchestrate all of this, how they're going to introduce Ken and Roman into the public sphere. And this conversation is really important, and it highlights a few things. They're in their father's office, and, you know, I think it was Roman who was like, did you know he plays Sudoku? And Ken was like, yeah, I think I do. You know, Ken is trying to, you know, remember his father, but the problem is you have no connection with your father anymore. Y'all are basically estranged. And the way he was like, yeah, I think I know that. Like, he doesn't know anything about his dad, right? He hasn't seen him, or like the only time they saw each other was when they were yelling at each other. Like, y'all aren't that close. And so they meet with their PR team, and they kind of come up with two strategies, right? Two different methods of doing things. The first is to kind of make it seem like, you know, they're all family and everything is great, and, you know, they're going to follow Logan's wishes to the T. And then they present this alternate view to be like, listen, y'all are incompetent. The only way people might buy that you are competent is if we slander Logan, right? And their plan basically was like, here's what we can do. We can make it seem that Logan has been kind of losing his mind, that all the decisions or the major decisions that have been made were by you kids, and, you know, you've been involved this whole time. And this is an interesting narrative because he is old. Logan is old, you know, like, it could work, but at the same time, the idea that he was being puppeteered also doesn't work. And what I found really fascinating about this is Roman's reaction. He was disgusted, right? Roman is, do not bring this disgusting shit in front of us again. And the thing is, for better or worse, he was still their father, and he's dead, right? So Roman's attitude is like, listen, like, what happens in this raggedy family stays in this raggedy family. Like, he was disgusted, and he's always liked, out of the three children, he's always been more loyal to Logan. And Kendall's raggedy behind, he was for it. They'll start the smear campaign using, you know, all this bad stuff that their father did, kind of open the vault and let the, you know, release the Krakens. Kendall's decision at the end is really interesting because just before he speaks to Hugo, he checks the documents one more time. You know, he's trying to validate himself, but, you know, is this underlined or is it crossed out? And I think he got angry. You know, I think it frustrated him that he still doesn't have a clear answer. And some part of him knows that his father probably crossed out his name. And that just pissed him off, I feel like that's what kind of triggered his whole, like, all right, we're going to do this the messy way. But he never takes accountability for any of it. I think there's a reason his father didn't really respect him, because the problem with Kendall is he takes no accountability for anything that he does. And that was my problem in this final scene. Like, this is what Dad would have wanted. Dad would have done the same thing. And he says that a lot in the previous seasons. Like, that's a thing that comes up. He never, like, if he just said, listen, this is what we're going to do. We have no choice. This is my decision. Like, that's different. But he kind of uses his father as a scapegoat to justify his bad behavior because he's not a leader, right? It's like the invisible hand of his father is still, like, moving him around, because without him, he's kind of nothing. I think that's why Logan would never put this in his hands, because he's not a decision maker, right? And he doesn't take accountability for his decisions. Like, at least Logan knows what he is. But with Kendall, like, oh, this is what Dad would have wanted. Like, that's such a cop-out. And the way he threatens Hugo, you know, should I put my strap-on on? Basically referring to the conversation he overheard and what Hugo had told him during the party, that his daughter had basically engaged in insider trading. So, you know, Kendall resorted to methods that, you know, to be honest, his father would have done, but he just didn't take any accountability for it. And I think when Roman finds out what Kendall is doing, that's it. Like, this is like the beginning of the end. This is like just their stark reactions to it. Like, I don't think this is something Roman would ever forgive if he ever found out. Overall, a fantastic episode. You know, I like that these episodes are taking place day by day. I think the problem with this whole family is they don't know when to quit. You know, again, they're very close to the door. All they have to do is sell and move on. But still, they have something to prove. Still, they have a chip on their shoulder. And until they get the validation they need, they're going to destroy each other. So I'm so excited to see where this goes. You guys let me know what you think, and until next time.